dive in.
Quiet while you stop.
Oh, what you were saying about video. Yeah. The podcast itself is audio only. I do, as of this moment, I offer the videos on a YouTube channel for my Patreon patrons, but I only have at this point one patron. And it's a former student of mine, and I'm a patron of hers, and she's a patron of mine, so it's a total wash. But I
always start somewhere.
Oh, exactly. It's fine. I just laugh at it. It's hysterical. I'm toying with the idea of opening up the video on the YouTube channel as just another way of marketing the podcast. And, you know, I've been taking snippets out for the last few episodes. I finally learned how to embed video in an ad to run on, or a promo to run on Instagram. And, you know, I'm learning as I go. And so I've been pulling little snippets of 50-second snippets out of the video for those things. So we'll see.
Okay.
I don't know. I will send you all of the links once all the tech is done and everything is up. So this probably won't air till early May, I think.
I'm in long term, so I'm in no rush. So at your own pace.
Okay.
Okay, I'll be quiet so you can do your intro because I know you're recording. So
yeah, no, it's fine. I'll just chop it off. I need a tissue. Hold on one second. I have to blow my nose. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm back. I always have a tissue box over here, but I have 4 cats and they climb all over everything. So it was on the floor under a chair, and
they're doing that. They're running a test.
Well, you know, this is my art studio. I'm a painter also. So this is why there's paint on the wall, and there's just detritus and stuff all over here because the cats pull out these bins and dig. So there's all sorts of... It's crazy here. Okay, I'm ready. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Permission to Heal. I am Marci Brockman, and I am thrilled that you're here. Today, I have David Hennessey. Thank God for Zoom, because he's from France and I'm in New York. 20 years ago, David Hennessey created a holistic personal development program called the Wonder Technique that has continued to evolve over the years. David has presented the Wonder Technique at hundreds of workshops and seminars. His formal training is in psychology and nutrition, and he has traveled to over 20 countries and lived in 3 of them. His goal is to give fundamental tools of personal development to everyone on the planet. It's pretty amazing. He is passionate about simplifying the ability for people to live happy, healthy lives, and he also loves hiking and rock climbing. Welcome, David. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Marci. This is a pleasure to be here to share some time with you. Long distance, but it's great.
Yeah, you know, before the Zoom thing, I mean, one of the blessings that came out of this pandemic was, I think in some respects, in many respects, it shrank the world for us.
Yes.
You know, because we have this opportunity to have conversations across the Atlantic Ocean. You know, I've had guests from Australia,
Wow.
and I would not have met them, let alone been able to converse with them on the podcast without Zoom. And I don't think any of us even knew Zoom existed before the pandemic. So
true.
You know,
I didn't.
no. So you always look for the silver lining, you know?
There is.
Always, always. So I am very intrigued by this Wonder Technique. I have done a little bit of research on you, but not enough where I know the answers to your questions.
Okay.
So I would love to dive into that. But before we get started, let's do the 6 quick questions. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm ready.
What 6 words would you use to describe yourself?
Okay. Well, I know that they'll know I'm no longer alive when I'm no longer curious. So curious is one of them. I've always been super curious. That has never left me as I've got older. I'm also more and more adventurous. You mentioned a little bit about the rock climbing. Most people would have taken up rock climbing maybe 30, 40 years ago, but me, no, I waited till much later in my life to get involved in one of the greatest experiences of my life right now, which teaches me in all kinds of ways.
I'm sure.
I'm also super energetic. Most people, like when I go rock climbing, for example, people way younger than me, they're like, we need to pause and rest. I'm like, why? So because I'm just like, I'm so excited about doing stuff. And perhaps in contrast, but maybe not with those three words, I'm also very focused. And that I used to not always be. I've trained myself to be focused. I'm also very patient and I can be very relaxed. Most people think I'm always on the go because they look at my life from the outside.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, the balance of being at a pause is like, as I shared before, in music, music has the silence between the notes, which actually allows us to hear the music. And my life is like that. I always take pauses. Before the opportunity with you today, I took the time to sit and to wait and to be ready for you rather than be rushing to the last minute, because life is often like that. In the past, for me, I was notorious for being late until I made a commitment to myself to respect other people and not be late and push myself to be on time. And that's brought me a lot of peace. So there's the 6 words.
That's cool. Yeah, I was born 2 weeks late, and I feel like I'm always a little bit late for things, even though I try not to be. I have reminders and multiple reminders, and I set timers and alarms in my phone and on my watch, and I try really, really hard to be on time, and I've gotten a lot better. Today notwithstanding. I apologize for being late.
Okay.
And I think that it's, for me, a failed attempt, I guess, at trying to be more productive, trying to squeeze more in, get more things done, and I underestimate the travel time.
Okay.
You know? So that's where I get with that. My husband, I make him crazy because if he's not early, he feels like he's late.
Okay.
So he's really helped me a lot in that capacity because I want to try to help mitigate his anxiety. And I know that if we're a little bit early or at least on time, that it would be better for everybody. So yes. I allow him to control that a little bit, which is good.
Yeah, it's all about the balance and the understanding of each other. It's great.
Exactly.
That's important.
All right, number 2. What is your favorite way to spend a day?
Hiking in the mountains, as high up as I can be, like up in the Alpine, as we would say. I spent a lot of times, I used to live in British Columbia, Canada. So you'd spend a lot of time down low in the woods and the trees before you get up to the top. And now living in the south of France, when I go to the Alps, I'm going to be up pretty high and I'm working on a trail that's 2,500 kilometers, so probably about 2,000 miles.
Wow.
We're doing it bit by bit, a friend of mine and myself, and we do pieces of it each year. We've done the whole length of the French Alps now, already as one portion. And a lot of times we're really high up. It's just absolutely breathtaking and spectacular.
See the whole world from there.
Oh yes. So
glorious.
that's always a great day for me. Even when I'm alone. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I have this habit of interrupting. Go ahead.
It's okay. Often I go hiking on my own, which some people might say, that's not a great idea. But you know what? If you looked in my backpack, I've got stuff that I could be out there several days on my own. And that's what I call resilience in advance. I'm always prepared. I've trained myself to anticipate in my whole life over the years. And you can see that in different areas, like in my backpack, in my car, I've got the jumper cables. In the house, I have a fire extinguisher. Most people, like I've never had a fire at home. And every time I've used the jumper cables to help someone else with their car. But it's like, it's just having the tools in place. And I think about taking care of ourselves and our health and well-being is about knowing the tools in advance. So we have them when we go through stressful periods like we all have in the whole world in the last year. So I am very fortunate that what I knew before entering this moment in time that I'd worked on for a long time. So it gives me with great gratitude the opportunity to help people during this time.
That's cool. Yeah, I have an fire extinguisher under my kitchen sink and jumper cables in my back. And cool. To me, you're an irresponsible homeowner and car owner if you don't have those things.
Few people do, and I've encountered a lot.
Okay, I'll trust you on that. I haven't actually done any of the survey. So yeah, I guess being a former Girl Scout and the mom of an Eagle Scout, preparation I've realized is key It's an integral thing, you know.
Yes. In fact, I was never a scout, but in Ireland, where I was born, there's a Gaelic phrase, and my Gaelic is, I would butcher it. I know much more French than I know Gaelic, but there's a phrase in Gaelic which is, I believe, Bialav, which translates into English is be prepared. And that's a scouting
Yeah.
phrase. And that is really, in everything in life, if we think about things being prepared from everything from our relationships to going for a trip in the car. You mentioned we just talked about the cables,
Sure.
problems happening in the world. What if I lost my job? Do I have some savings?
Right.
What if the stores are closed, which we've had happen? Like
Yeah.
tomorrow, the stores are all closed. You can't go out in France. Do I have any food?
Right.
Like, do people wait till the last minute? Not people in general, but some people will not be prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always good to kind of anticipate what would happen. How can I deal with this? And this is not an obsession. This is not a paranoia. This is just being simply prepared. Like you have bandages at home in case
Yeah.
somebody cuts themselves.
Exactly.
You don't wait till somebody
Fully
cuts
stocked
themselves and
first
then
aid
go
kit,
to the
I think, is
store.
prudent. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. My
Sure.
husband was slightly aggravated because I have us on an automatic delivery of paper goods, napkins, paper towels, toilet paper, and
Excellent.
they're all made from bamboo, so it's more
Really good.
sustainable and better for the
Yes.
earth. And he was like, "Why did you order more? We have so much in overstock downstairs already." But last year, a year ago, we were very low, and none of the stores had anything because everybody
Yes.
was panicked about buying. And I'm like, so these are the things that the basic staples of running a household that I
For sure.
don't want to run out of. So I'm glad I have a surplus. I'm
And
not
Marci,
hoarding, but I'm
yeah,
prepared.
exactly. And in fact, what that allows you to do as well is if someone else is short, you can share with them.
Absolutely.
This is what I do. I have extra stuff like in my backpack. I have 2 emergency blankets, which fold up super small, smaller than the
Hmm.
palm of your hand. But if I'm on my own, and I've met people missing stuff on the trail in the mountains.
Sure.
So by being prepared, it allows you to help other people. And we're really here in the world to help each other, carry the
Exactly.
load in a gentle way.
Hence this podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Exactly.
Permission to heal.
People have sort of tongue in cheek made fun of me my whole adult life because I carry a very large purse.
Okay.
And it is filled with all sorts of stuff that most of the time I don't need. But if somebody needs Advil or Tylenol because they have a headache, or they need a Band-Aid, or they need, hair ties, or they need, whatever, I've got it. So they'll
Yes.
tease me, oh, Marci and her big purse, but someone needs something, I'm the one they go to. They joke that I'm a pharmacy, but if you've got indigestion, I'm the one you want in your group,
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
There's always a reason. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Good training by my mom.
Yeah.
What is your favorite childhood memory?
The thing that comes out most is I love taking things apart. And that ties actually into the wonder technique. That's the curiosity. How do
Uh-huh.
things work? I mean, my biggest memory of taking things apart was taking apart an electrical lamp when it was still plugged in, which was probably
Ouch.
not the wise. Yeah, to get a shock for sure. And I was just so curious. I was even curious enough that I would take little tires off toy cars and cut the tires in half just to see what it felt like. Like, how does it cut? Like, I would just want
Huh.
to know how things work.
Did you put them back
And
together?
well, it's really hard to put rubber tires back
Well, no,
together.
not that, but the lamp you took apart, were you able
Oh
to put it
yeah,
back
so yeah,
together?
yeah. And actually, you know what? When I originally, well, you would notice, very few people do. When I originally went to university, before I ended up fully immersed in psychology, I went for mechanical engineering because I was very good at working on engines and cars and figuring out things. And that was
That's
because
my
when I
son's
was
major.
really young, I was studying how things worked,
Hmm.
taking engines apart, and just a curiosity. And that kind of moved from physical things to humans over time, trying to figure out the
Intangible
simplest
things.
way to help people because we make things way too complex, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Could
I
be
think we
wrong.
overthink way
Yeah,
too much.
yeah,
Absolutely. Number 4. What is your
yes.
favorite meal?
My favorite meal, I would say, will often
Considering your
include.
multinational background, I can't wait to hear this.
Well, actually, this is very simple and straightforward. A meal would, if it includes salmon, I'm very happy because I grew up in British Columbia, most of a third of my life in British Columbia, and we could get fresh salmon off the boat. And because the nutritional side of me knows how
It's
good
really good for
wild
you.
salmon can
Yeah.
be for me, but to me, I'm not infatuated with food because of its nutritional parts, but I'm aware of it. But I'm also enjoy it, and the harmony with. Instead of farmed fish, the harmony of nature and the cycle and everything. Of course, some people will totally disagree with me, but I think that pretty much everything that we eat, it's a bit of controversy here, it's dead when we eat it. Like if I pull an apple off the tree, I've ended its life for me to eat it. And if I pull a fish out of the ocean, the same. So, but it's just a matter of respect for what we're using to nourish our bodies. But to answer the question simply, salmon, nothing in particular. I know I've listened to some of your other podcast guests and you have more depth to it, but in the terms of foods, I'm quite a simple person.
Yeah. How do you like your salmon prepared?
Usually it would be baked in the oven.
Okay.
Yeah. Very simple. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'll make salmon tonight. What I find very interesting, and that I would have been completely wrong in my prediction. Now, I've only been doing this podcast since November of 2020, so it's not like I have a wealth of responses to this yet. Okay. But more people are picking fish or seafood than anything else. That's and I really wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought it would have been like a typical like carb-loaded comfort food kind of thing. But that's not the case, which is quite interesting.
That is quite interesting.
I don't know if it means anything, but it's interesting.
Yeah. We would take a total left turn if we started talking about why that's a good idea in terms of, protein-based foods as against people taking fast-burning foods in their body. But then I can do this.
That's a whole different conversation.
That's a different conversation.
But with your nutrition background, we could go there too.
Yes. We can go many places with the Wonder Technique. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm ready for your next one.
Okay. Number 5. What one piece of advice would you like to give your younger self?
Well, this I know for sure. Relax, David. It'll all work out. Because I was very intense, not just as a young person, but even as a teenager into my early 20s, where like trying to make sure everything worked and just not relaxed, like very, very stressed.
Worked in what way?
Meaning that how shall I say, having to get like the perfect grades, having to know everything. Like I would walk into a test and I would know everything. Like it was like the book was still in front of me that I was studying because I studied it to beyond the need. Okay. So trying to overdo everything to make sure I knew everything. And as I know now in life, you just have to leave space in experiences. And if you don't know something, well, that's a learning experience. It's not a failure. I don't like to use the word failure because I don't think there is failures. I think there's only experiences. What do you get from them? And you have to allow things to happen and be willing to do things differently. I mean, I know from listening to your podcast before where you talked about how you proposed in your marriage, right?
Yeah.
And I thought that was very cool. And being, willing to do things differently, not expecting things to go, well, because most people do it this way, this is what I have to do. So I've learned over time to take apart my own mind, question, are these things great? Okay, I can accept that. I'll still keep using that until I find a better way.
Right.
And then
do what works.
Being open. Yes. But before it was like, no, this has to work. Even if it's not working, I'm going to still try and make it work. This doesn't work at all. So that's why I'd say, relax, David. It'll all work.
That's a good one. I think a lot of us, when we were younger, made the same choices, the same kinds of mistakes, I'll put in quotes. I think that as we grow older, hopefully we become a little more self-aware or a lot more self-aware, and we have the experience behind us to be able to stop ourselves from that.
Yes.
Like trying to solve the same problem in the same ineffective way over and over and over again. It's just a recipe for driving yourself insane.
Exactly.
Right.
It's very true.
Very true. Last question. What is the one thing you most would like to change about the world?
my goal is part of the wonder technique, but as part of the expression of my life is to help people focus more on what's simple than complex.
Mm-hmm.
The best example that I have is that often I meet people who are going through a difficult moment in their life, particularly in relationships, because
Hyper
relationships are
focused
very,
on
very important.
relationships. Yes.
Yeah. And it sounds so amazing. They'll tell me I'm having a challenge with a person, and I'll say, well, when did you last talk to them about it? I haven't talked to them about it yet. And I'm like, okay, tell me more. It's like, how recent is this? Like weeks ago. And it's like, if there's no conversation, how can you build rapport, build understanding?
Right.
And nowadays, sometimes people will choose to completely end a relationship rather than tackle the challenge of it.
I see that
And,
too, and I don't understand.
well,
If
it
you're
is a
willing, if
choice.
you're willing to say, I never want to talk to you again, you're not risking anything by having the conversation because you've already adjusted yourself to the loss of the relationship. So
Yeah,
why not go for broke and just say what you want to say? I don't
yeah,
understand that. People will do almost anything to avoid the pain and discomfort of a difficult conversation or something they feel is confrontational. And I don't get that.
yeah. I understand what you're saying. And this is comes down to us as humans. We're looking for joy, love, happiness, to give, to use your phrase, permission to heal,
Mm-hmm.
to allow ourselves. And as I've encountered over the last year, especially going through the pandemic, which is still with us,
Yes.
is that a lot of people are very hard on themselves, amazing people that are hard on themselves, and they need to give themselves permission to be loved,
Mm-hmm.
which is permission to be healed, because we all have inside of us an enormous capacity to love. And the mistakes that I've made in my own life is when I don't recognize that really love is a great healer.
Right.
You know, I'd say sometimes throw love on the fire. Like, you know what, if you, I'm not perfect. I'm always in a
Nobody is.
process of learning,
Right.
but I can't think of a way without using love to help solve a problem. However, I've been taught that it's really important to learn that another person's approach is not going to be my approach, which goes back to what we talked about earlier about, relax, David, it'll work out.
Mm-hmm.
So even though you want something to go a certain way, it may
You
not
can't,
go that way. And
yeah, you
that's
can't
part of
control it.
loving, is accepting. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You have to say your piece and let the other person take or leave what you said. You
Yeah.
can't make them take it. You can't make them do what you want in the way that you think that they should.
Exactly.
I mean, we don't even have that control
You have
or
zero
that
control.
effect on our own children, let alone another adult.
Exactly.
I used to be a chronic people pleaser and felt like I don't know what made me think this, but I felt like I was the one that had to help them solve their problem, whatever their problem was. That it was up to me to make them happy again, to bring them back to status quo.
Yes.
And I was very rarely successful because you can't really do that for somebody else. If it's a simple little task, like a physical task, okay, fine, you can do that. But if it's anything really meaningful, it's kind of impossible. And I have learned through a lot of therapy and a lot of sitting quietly with myself and some journaling to let go. I say my piece and I walk away.
Yes.
And they'll do or not do what makes sense to them. And that's that.
Exactly. Exactly. It's very true. We all have our own process that we're working on,
Right.
and we're all doing the best that we can at this moment in time. And we all do things differently. And it's an interesting thing to think about. As human beings, we're also different.
Mm-hmm.
And for the understanding, me talking to you, between man and woman, we have different ways of looking at things.
Right.
To recognize that and see that, okay, even though I do it this way, or I think about it this way, this is not going to be the same way that you're going to think. And if we do align on it, that's wonderful. But even if we don't align on it, that's also wonderful. It's positive because you're learning something about the other person. These are lessons that I continually learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's possible that in discussion, philosophically, we could absolutely agree dead on, but then depending on situation, in practice, it would deviate and become idiosyncratic. You know,
Yes.
It's not always consistently what it is. People are weird animals. What can I tell you?
We're amazing. This is what makes us so different and so enjoyable, because if you think about the inverse, if everybody was so similar,
how boring would that be?
Oh gosh, like let me out.
Right.
You know, life is a great adventure.
I think they made Twilight Zone episodes about that, you know?
Yeah.
It's just scary.
It's just, it's incredibly good, the richness of life, because we're so different. Mm-hmm. And just the acceptance of the differences, that's the good news. You know, we have some bugs in our software that make us think that people that are different are not great. And that's a bug in the system. There's a problem there.
Yeah.
Because we're all beautiful. You know, we're all whatever expression we are. And it doesn't matter what age, where we're from, what we look like, it doesn't matter. And that's the coolest thing, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that some of that fear of people being different is somewhat politically motivated. I think that certain leaders like to have us divisive against each other, and so that they can misappropriate blame and deflect blame and stay in power.
Yeah, this is a psychological thing. It's like the other technique.
Right.
You know,
and I think that that's somewhat pervasive. I know in American culture, in New York where I live, it's that way. And I think in pockets all over the United States, it's that way. I've never spent an appreciable amount of time in any other country, unfortunately, so I can't speak to that. But we need a lot of work to get back to any sense of community mindedness that we may or may not have used to have. I don't know if that sentence made any sense, but I sense a more appreciable separation and lack of community mindedness, a lack of empathy toward other people and their circumstances, or a ready hand extended in help and assistance than there used to be. And I don't know if that's true or it's just my sense of it. You know, I'm not sure. Anyway.
Well, I will say, Marci, that from my experience from traveling and 23 countries that I visited, and most of them for a chunk of time, this has been the greatest lesson for me to understand people better. Now, I've lived in 3 countries long-term: Ireland, Canada, France, meaning more than 10 years. Uh-huh. And when I traveled as well, like I was in northern Pakistan before I went up into the Himalayas. And when you go to places, what the media says, and we're talking the media in general, social media, everything, reality is very different. You know, it's like the experience of life is very different when you move around and you travel and you meet people on their home base. Mm-hmm. Like living in France now, the perception, I remember I'd spent time in France before I moved from Canada to France with my family, and the perception in North America, how French people live, and the myths that roll around in the heads of people, whether it's through books or movies, just doesn't match with life in France. Okay. And in, you know, the stories like the Irish people, I always remember people saying, oh, the Irish, they love their drink, they're always drinking. And I remind people that in Ireland, the houses have always been very small. And what happened, I have family where there's 6 people living in a 2-bedroom home. And the only place that you could go out and socialize was to go to a pub. Right. The pub was a community center. It wasn't because the Irish people are infatuated with drinking alcohol. It's because That's can't invite 3, 4 friends over. You've already got 6 people in the house. You got 1 room plus the kitchen. The kitchen's too small to stand up in. It's like, and you need your own bit of space. So there's lots of pubs in Ireland because it's a social meeting place. Right. But
public meeting house is what they right?
You better believe how many people that I meet, and they assume that I drink a lot, which I don't. And it's like there's perceptions that are based upon myths
Right.
that are conjured up over
Very
time. But the
interesting.
beauty is when you go to different countries, you get a real feeling as to what life is all about if you spend a little bit of time. And you're also traveling. Like I traveled with a backpack. I traveled roughly compared to way rough in the sense that I wasn't staying in fancy hotels and things like that. So traveling in buses, going across the deserts in North Africa, and you're with the local people. You got a sense of what they're like, and you try and converse, and you kind of stumble along. But this is where we learn about the diversity of us as human beings, and we also get to see what life is really like. This is my perception. I could be completely wrong, but of course,
No,
everything in my mind is framed by my experience.
the people who I know who are world travelers like you have said the similar things to me.
Yeah.
So,
So it's very important that I think for like my children, because we've moved around a bit, they have had different experiences in different places. It's very good for people to experience what other
yes.
people, and then you kind of go, okay, now I see. Okay, yeah, like when I remember again mentioning in Pakistan, when you went to a marketplace up in north of Islamabad, and this was normal life where people would go to the market. We got off the bus to get water before we were heading up towards Nanga Parbat, and they had vegetables. I'm pretty sure they had fish, like they had meats for sale, and they had guns for sale in the market.
Huh.
It was just out there, like, and it was, to me, it was like, whoa, hang on. But this is because like local people were hunting and stuff like that. It was
Sure.
normal. It's part of the culture. Like in France, there's still a huge amount of people who hunt. It's and it's like you go out hiking and you've got to watch out for some guy with a gun that's out hunting for wild boar. And I never had that in Canada. It's more.
Is it
I'm
for
more.
sport or for food or
It's
both?
well, I'm not a hunter, so I wouldn't know. But they do eat what they shoot. My assumption is that it's complex, right? But
Yeah.
there's people who still do that, but it doesn't, like in Canada when I hiked for years and years in the mountains. I never met people out there hunting. So but it's part of the culture in France. There's still a certain portion, I don't know what percentage, of people who like to go hunting.
Hmm.
And it's now kind of like, okay, when I go hiking, I need to be aware that I have to pay attention for signage that says Ilion Chasse, there's a hunt going on, and I can't go in that area because I don't want to accidentally be in the way of something.
Sure.
But you kind of get a feeling, okay, so this is part of the culture here,
Hmm.
you know. In Canada, there's lots of black bears, so I'm like, okay, got to pay attention to that part of the culture.
Of course.
Here, I'm
Definitely.
not worried about bears. Here, I'm worried about hunters. So, anyways, I'm
Right.
digressing a little bit here, and
No,
you know,
to be aware of your surroundings and take it
exactly,
all in.
yeah,
It's the wonders of being human on this planet.
yeah,
There are many, many things that bind us together and make us the same, and many other delightfully joyful differences. So,
yes, for sure.
okay, so let's dive into the wonder technique. I want to know what this is. Catch us
Okay,
up. Explain it.
okay.
Where'd it come from?
Okay, well, it originated around the time that my mom had gone through cancer it's back in the 90s, 1990s. And I spent time with her, and I wasn't the only person. I always like to make sure I say this,
Hmm.
spending time with her, but I went with her onto appointments and that. And I was working on trying to make things easier for her to understand. When you're dealing with a medical issue, you will be very stressed. It's not you
Hmm.
can be. Most cases you will be, and to understand how you map those things into your life, new habits that you have to create, can be very hard. And I loved, as I mentioned before, to simplify things, Marci. And I was like,
Hmm.
okay, how can I make this easier so that my mom could practice as a habit? So as she recovered, I spent more time learning more. I'd already long since finished going through university in psychology. I started taking more training in different things like nutrition and that, and looking for the simple path. And what has happened is I started the Wonder Technique as shall we say, a protocol, as a system back in around 2000.
Hmm.
And I started teaching seminars and workshops. And what is very interesting to me, as I've mentioned before to other people, is that over the last 20 plus years, I can see where the consistency of the core principles of health and wellness still exist. Like some things come and go, but some things don't change. And some things
Right.
become much, much clearer. When I started out, and a great example, there was research, talk about it, but not as much belief in it, the importance of sleep. And how, when I look at things holistically in terms of our health and wellness, our personal development, how we live, if you're not sleeping properly, this will impact everything.
Everything, yeah.
Not just your longevity, not just your fertility. It'll impact your ability to recover from exercise. It'll impact your ability to meditate. It will impact your ability for you to choose the right foods, to be stable in relationships. You have to, there's all kinds of things that come from that. Then I will say, move aside from the sleep and go to the foods that we eat. People want to take the time to quieten their mind and relax. But if you're playing with your blood sugar level by the foods that you're eating, you can't sit still. You can't harmonize. You may not be able to sleep properly because you've eaten too soon before you went to sleep. Right. All of these things, what I call cross-pollinate, which is not really the right word, but they impact each other. So there's like all parts of our lives. And when we take things into a silo and say, you know what, I can manage my health and well-being by just exercising. It's helpful. It works. It's important. It's not sufficient. Right. So the Wonder Technique is based on the principles that over the years I've gathered, assembled together, and I keep on looking to find connections and to eliminate things that are not correct. And I'm always looking like to take a piece of coal and crystallize and make it like into a diamond, like where it makes sense. And I've had discussions, shall we call them, with nutritionists who say, you don't need to drink that much water because once you drink tea, coffee, and juice, that's okay. And I'm like, hang on a second here. Tea and coffee, they're diuretics. They actually pull water out of your body. How can drinking those be sufficient? Well, you'll get water from your foods. How much water is the food? What food are you eating? Like, I'm like being what we call in English, the devil's advocate. Like I'm saying, hang on, this doesn't make sense. Instead of genuinely identifying, yes, we do need to drink water. And then the next step, which most people will look at, well, okay, I know water is important, and I could give you a number of reasons why water would be important for your body in terms of your hydration, the impact on the potential causes of headaches, fatigue after exercise. Even people, I've read books say your body's many years ago, your body's many cries for water. People that helped alleviate pain in their back by hydrating their body properly because of the fact that you have biological water inside the discs that are inside your body. Like there's all kinds of relationships between hydration in the human body. And then I say to people, well, the key thing here is if, for example, if it's water you want to make the habit, you have to make water available. Now, right now in the world, we don't travel around as much, but we will get to do this soon. And the best way of dealing that is bring with you water wherever you go. You've got something here, right? And right beside me, I have a glass of water here.
I always have this red water bottle with me.
It's perfect. So when you travel around, it's available, because if it's not available, you're not going to be able to drink and you can't make it a habit. Right. And I mentioned yesterday on a podcast, I said, the lady was asking about making habits. And I said, well, you choose one thing, one solitary idea you want to work on. For example, hydration. Doesn't matter what it is, but we're talking about water at this second. And then you take your calendar, not on your phone, a physical calendar, like the old calendar on the wall, and you cross off a day as you start to make that goal. And because you're seeing it, you're taking the action. There's something about the physical interaction between hand and paper. You're a writer, you notice there's something different. Yeah. Maybe you write digitally, there's a choice, but there's something very powerful about that kinesthetic, the feeling, the touch of doing it, and seeing, okay, 1 day, wow, 2 days, great, 3 days, and you're building up the habit. And then once you've established that kind of compounding effect that you can use positively in your life and also negatively, you can create bad habits too.
Sure.
So what you want to do is then say, okay, I can add something else into the process.
So you're doing one thing at a time, changing
Pardon
habits or modes of behaving one thing at a time.
One thing at a time. That's the simplification instead of the complexity. And it's also actually, if you think about some people that are trying to find out why I have an issue with food, they do an elimination diet.
I did that.
They're eliminating things, right? And if you work on one thing at a time, then you get to see, this is making a difference. But if, for example, you decide to take a meditation, exercise, hydrate your body, change your diet all at the same time, you're not going to know exactly. It's very hard to figure out what's working inside of that whole system.
Right.
But if you keep everything, and you mentioned you journal. So if a person writes down, okay, this is what I did today. This is you can rate yourself in the morning if you want. Simply, how do I feel right now when I wake up in the morning? Do I feel energized?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, no, kind of like you can rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 if you wish. And do I feel excited about my day? How do I look at it? Great, fine. Then at the end of the day, how do I feel? What did they change about my day? Did anything change because I'm now drinking more water? Or did anything change because I got up in the morning and I did an exercise, and I want to underline it here, an exercise that I enjoy, that
Right.
not somebody told me I need to do, but something I enjoy doing? How am I feeling? Or I quit the exercise like running that I don't like doing, only my friends like doing it, but I don't like it. But now I'm doing rock climbing and I love it. How do I feel about that?
Exactly.
So you kind of introspective, you look at yourself and say, okay, I'm making positive changes. How am I feeling about it? You need to assess what's going on and what's working, because maybe you need to readjust it. It's kind of like when you're running a business.
Yeah. I started a little over a year ago. I was seeing a dietitian just to help figure out what was going on. And I did one of these elimination diets. We started with like 10 foods that I was eating for like 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then slowly started adding things back in based on my own body's inflammatory response to a bunch of foods done in a laboratory in a blood test.
Okay.
Or like 175 blood tests. But yeah, you get the idea.
Yes.
And since then, I've been keeping a journal. What I eat for each meal, what I drink during the day, and then another column for medicines, for like vitamins and supplements. How did I sleep? How did I feel? What I ate last night, how did that affect how I slept? How did it affect how I felt when I woke up? How did I feel during subsequent days based on what I've eaten? And I started to see patterns of certain foods that caused hot flashes, and certain foods that if I ate sugar at night, I would wake up with a headache. And depending on what that was, I might say, okay, I'm going to enjoy this food now, even though I'm going to have a headache tomorrow because I love this so much. It's a trade-off. And I find that it helps be mindful of what it is that I'm doing, and I'm not just on autopilot eating it just because everyone else is, or eating it because it's convenient, or because I always did, or whatever. Like I'm really trying to figure out how all of this affects my own attitude, my own mood, my own sleep, digestion, weight gain, etc. So it's a process. I haven't figured it out yet, but
yeah. And great courage you have to work on this, because there's a choice not to, and there's a choice to, and that's what you're doing. And it's not easy, but
I reached 50 and my body just doesn't feel like it used to. And between a hysterectomy and menopause, I feel like more akin to a brain transplant than anything else. Nothing feels the same. Every single body system has changed, because hormone production has changed.
Yes.
And so I had to do, for me and my own analytical brain, I had to do this elimination diet and the tracking of things through this chart I have on my computer that I made in order to figure out, to reacquaint myself with this biological system that's now housing my brain. It feels like totally different. It might look the same from the outside, but from the inside, very different.
And there's where you're leaning onto the wisdom of taking action by making a choice, because if you make a choice, you might find out I don't want to continue, but at least you made the choice. And for those people that are listening to us at this moment in time, the conversation that we're having at some point in the future, Marci, that's the key in life, is where we make choices and we don't just keep on rolling, because what we do today is creating the life that we have tomorrow. Every action that we take. And what we did before today has led us to where we are now. So once we acknowledge that we do have control over where we're going, we can make changes if we want to, if we feel we need to. Mm-hmm. But it's the consciousness, it's the mindfulness that you're talking about. And that awareness that over time, for example, for me, when you practice things and you figure it out what works for you, it becomes so much easier. Like I don't think about, am I eating good quality food? It's because that's my habit now.
Right.
It's all in place. I'm not worried about it, and I don't penalize myself. And there's a whole framework that so over time you decode everything, you figure it out, and then you just kind of go with the flow, and then you see. And one of the things that you mentioned about assessing your day and that for people, this can be very, very important, because you might find out that one of the reasons why you cannot hold an attentive conversation with the person that you love or your children, and that could be because you're biochemically out of balance,
Right.
because of something that you're doing. And that awareness can just be incredible. People can feel that they're upset or angry or grumpy or whatever way they want to say it. And it's because they have a dietary issue, or they have so much stress built up that they need to release it by being more active or taking the time to quieten their mind.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very courageous for people to take the time and say, listen, I'm willing to deal with the wrecking ball that's coming into my life because I want to make things better. And it's a dissatisfaction that will help you make new goals. And if may I share a little bit of an idea of when people are looking to make goals, they often ask me, how do you get motivation to have a goal? And if I may share?
Sure. Go
ahead. I say to people,
this is all about you, so good.
Well, the idea that, you know what, if you're thinking about things, go to the future. One of the simplest examples is you imagine 5-10 years into the future. What if you don't change your current situation? Right. It could be financial. You're struggling financially. So you imagine, okay, if I continue in the same way in debt and I keep accumulating debt, 5-10 years from now, I might be bankrupt. I may not be able to pay my home, can't support my family. Okay, so then you march backward in time and say, okay, what can I change now? Simply one thing to make my life better. Mm-hmm. You could do that as well if you have children or you anticipate having children. Imagine you have grandchildren and you can no longer bend down because of your physical challenges that you have right now that are just starting. Like just a little bit sore in your knees when you walk, or a little bit back pain, but you're still very mobile. But if you don't take care of those things, where will it end up be? Imagine the worst case scenario, and then come back to say, okay, I haven't reached that. Wonderful. What can I do to change my life? And right. What will make my life better? So you can get motivation by looking forward and then reverse engineering to this moment in time. And I always say to people, if you can't stick to a goal, and I would say that to yourself, Marci, which sounds like you're able to make your goals and keep to them, is that it's because it's not the right goal. It's someone else's goal. Because the goals that you really want to achieve,
too lofty. I find myself as a chronic overachiever, someone who just jumps in with both feet. I find myself, my first gut instinct is to make a really big goal. And you can't attain a really big goal overnight. It's better to have smaller micro goals, if you will, so that you can reward yourself by achieving that smaller goal, and then you move the needle a little bit and you make a new goal. And eventually you've got all these little micro goals, which I guess is your way of changing one thing at a time. It's kind of the same way of looking at it. And eventually you get the whole thing, but you don't have to do it in one big fell swoop. I mean, nobody functions that way.
Exactly. It's the compounding effect over time, the same as to talk about compounding money for interest. And you look at if you want to change your body to one way or another, if it's something you want to do, you need to do, whatever, it happens bit by bit. And if you want to nourish your relationship, it's not about doing things one time a year, traditionally on Valentine's Day or someone's birthday. It's every action that you take each day.
Exactly.
It's taking the time to call a friend, maybe once a day, to call one of your friends, or whatever is good for you, like what's possible, but you nourish it over time. And all those little steps, those small steps make a difference. I was chatting with a lady recently, and she was talking about the biggest failure, she said, that people in business, they'll spend a lot of money on marketing, but they don't follow up with the past clients. And I said, you know what, you could decide, each day I will make one phone call to a past client just to thank them for their business, not to try and sell them on anything, not to give them anything, just to thank them that they did business with you. And it gets you into that mindset of being grateful.
Right.
It's a very important thing. And the second thing is you're making contact with people that already like what you do. So all of those things are small things. And as you know, you're a writer and you've written, and I've written quite a bit of stuff too, but probably not as much as you. And people will say, I'm going to
I
write a
don't think
book and I'm going to
that.
sell well,
Looking at your
people
website,
will,
I don't think that's true.
okay, well, okay. But when people say, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to sell 1 million copies, I'm like, hang on a second here. Have you written the book yet? No. Okay. Have you written a chapter? No. Have you even started? No. Okay. Start small and then work on it, because it can be very painful. I remember reading this where a young man, he was going to write a book on his life story, and incredible story that he had. And I won't share much about it because I don't want to people to think about it, because he put it out that he was going to write the story. He's going to sell 10 million copies, and everybody was, wow, this is great. I'll buy a copy. He never wrote the book. But he felt he'd made his way through a very difficult psychological depression in his life. But the fact that he set himself up for this huge goal,
right,
and then realized, I don't really want to write a book.
It's a lot of work.
He actually came back to be more depressed than he was before.
Oh, poor guy.
Which is really sad. And so there's complexities to making huge goals. If you have a huge goal, sure, have a huge goal, go for beyond the moon and stars. But maybe sometimes it's not always good to put it out there, because maybe it isn't really your goal. Because it is a very common thing when I meet people that are other coaches and that, and they say, oh yeah, I want to have, 10,000 clients, and they've got huge, it's all about numbers. And I'm like, if I can have one person, what's that?
Right.
Pardon me?
But how do you manage 10,000 clients?
I know. If you think about that, how could you deal with 10,000 clients? But that's a very good question. For me, if I can help one solitary person,
right,
that's what it's all about. Maybe one person listening might go, oh yeah, David said that, or Marci said that. I can do that. And that's what I would say to people is, pick one idea that you get, work on it. If it doesn't work, change and do something else. But if you try and apply multiple things at the same time, you're going to get a little bit frustrated. You won't be able to keep track of it. You won't see what's effective. And that comes down to
things change, you won't know what's responsible for the change.
Exactly. And
it's
Marci,
like doing a scientific experiment with more than one variable. You can't.
Exactly. Yes. And that's when all those science kind of falls apart. And I have actually, I'm pretty sure it's one of the 10, there's 10 items and 10 tips to health and happiness that I have in an ebook that's 30 pages long, no fluff in it. Anybody can get a copy of it, no charge, from connecting with me. And that's on my website. It's part of a whole group of things. And one of the things I put in there is to avoid being an eternal student. And that's the process where people will learn lots and lots and lots of stuff about, for example, personal development, but they actually never take anything and try and test it out and apply it.
They don't apply it, right?
Yeah. So we have so much information now through the internet, so many books that are produced, so many people read so much information. They go to so many seminars, they listen to so many podcasts. And they are still at the same point in time that they were 5-10 years ago, because they haven't applied something. So that comes back to what you talked about earlier, about making a choice, making a decision, taking action, and seeing how it works out. And if it doesn't work out, it's okay.
You don't do it. You stop doing it. You try something else.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the wonder, that's the wonder technique in a nutshell. It's small goals, trying one thing at a time, simplifying your process to find health and wellness, figure out what works for you.
That will be one way of expressing it. The Wonder Technique gets broken down into many pieces. For example, I have 10 mini courses that people have access to, and one of them is how to sleep well and wake up energized. Another is how to focus your mind and concentrate. So the Wonder Technique, in a general term, is very much a holistic approach to personal development. And my whole approach for anything that you want to change in your life, very good question, Marci, is all about taking small steps to work those things out and identifying what it is you need to work on. And a lot of times people know what they need to work on. They don't need assistance. But figuring out simply how to work on those things, that's one of the ways that I help a lot of people, because I simplify it, like to get a deeper night's sleep. Really to keep melatonin high so that your body is working on proper sleep, you need to be in a dark room, because light turns off melatonin. That's biological. A lot of people know this, but not really a lot of people know this.
Oh, I have to sleep in a cave. My husband could sleep at noon with the bright lights and the windows open. I can't sleep at all.
Yeah. And so we need to identify what those things are. And in your case, if you're in a room where he's asleep and he's got the light on and you put on something on your eyes, like there's ways around it
Sure.
to make things happen. So yes, the wonder technique is really about making complex things simple and helping people find a pathway in their life, even if it's looking for them to find their purpose, to identify what it is they need to work on. Yes.
So when I first read about it, I thought wonder might have been an acronym, but I think you're using the word to mean curiosity, right? That you're
No,
wondering about
the
things.
wonder technique actually at its core is an acronym, but I don't share the details of the acronym because unless I'm working with people or at conferences and that, because then people think, oh, that's all it is. They take it too simply.
Ah,
There's yeah, and inside of, like, for example, there's lots of acronyms that I use. So, some of them, well, one of them actually I share a lot, and I will share right now, which is actually not my acronym. Full disclosure, is the acronym HALT. If people are thinking about making decisions, there's an acronym HALT, and I'll give you my new version of it because I've actually altered the acronym. But if you're making a decision, if you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, these are not the times to make a decision. You need to
definitely not.
wait. And then I added something on there because over time I thought, yeah, people can be hungry, they can be angry, lonely, and tired, but there's another time when we make poor decisions, when we're sick,
Yeah.
we're feeling sad, we're feeling what, and because there's all kinds of things that happen, we're biochemically out of balance. So I put the S in front of halt, and it makes the old English word shalt, like thou shalt not do something. So
Ah,
so
so
it's
it's not
I
halts, but shalt.
yes,
Okay.
shalt. So now I would say to people, and like the articles on my website, SHALT, if you're sick, hungry, angry, lonely, or tired,
Thou shalt not pass.
yes, thou shalt not make a decision. Wait, and these will
Right.
pass, and you'll make better decisions. If you go to the store when you're hungry, you know you're going to buy stuff you don't
Oh,
need.
yeah. You get
If
a
you make
wagon full of
decisions about
stuff
a
you don't need.
relationship when you're angry, if you feel what's going on in the world right now because you're separated from people, you feel, okay, I really feel lonely, and all those things that stream from that. This is not the right time for you to make a decision. And if you're tired, not a good time. So these are fundamental things that help. Like, I like the acronyms because it helps me remember.
Mm-hmm.
It helps me give easy tools to people for them to remember as to how to do things. Like when, for example, when in the course that I have on how to find your purpose, the word purpose is an acronym. So yes, there is many different acronyms that I do use and create to help people remember things, Marci.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody yesterday about this exact thing, and I took notes. That's what I'm trying to find. Probably
Okay.
not a good time to be looking for something, but he had a different term for the same thing. I can't think of what it is, and I didn't write it down, so it's gone.
That's okay. Well, I like the words. I like the words that make sense to me
Yeah.
personally. Halt is like stop. It's a German word for
Yeah.
stop. So
Makes sense.
it's easy for me to remember and to link to it. So, for example, when people say to me, here's another one here that I rarely shared. Well, because you asked about it, so I will put it in here to remember to share with people as part of an event the importance of hydration. I
Right.
use the word water. Now, this is a treat because I've never shared this on a podcast yet.
Ooh, I'm
Okay.
blessed.
Okay. So W for weight management. The amount of water you drink will impact your weight.
Uh-huh.
Aches and pains in your body, that's the letter A. After exercise, for example, you need to be properly hydrated. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna mess around with the spelling of the word here.
That's okay.
Okay. Okay. If you're the next, you got T is for fatigue, for tiredness. Okay.
Okay.
You're going to need to be properly hydrated, so you need to drink water. E is for elimination.
Makes
People
sense.
that are not properly hydrated, it's very hard for them to be eliminate stuff from the body.
Yeah.
And O is for rest. Proper sleep is hard to do when you don't have a body that's properly hydrated. So there's 10, pardon me, the T actually, I correct myself. My brain I've got the notifications in my brain, not on my phone. The T is for tension, not for tiredness. O is for rest and sleep.
Okay.
Tension like a headache. So tension in your body. So when I get up and I present at an event, I have these acronyms in my head, but that acronym is beautiful. Why would you want to drink more water? There's the acronym. Use the
Right.
word to remind, because I have seen acronyms that are interesting that other people have created, but the word is either a word that doesn't exist.
Right.
And so your brain is trying to connect with something that's hard to remember already. And then how can you remember what it means? So when I say water, okay, weight management, aches and pains, tension in your body, elimination, rest, bingo. Why do I need to drink water? It's in the word.
Right. We have 5
So
reasons right there.
right there. So, and reasons why I've mentioned it just a little bit, but to remind people, acronyms are a great way to help your memory if you get nervous. Went through university. One of the ways I used to remember things for tests and that was I created acronyms, images, things to do. It's a great memory cue. So I use it. I suggest to people as well. So if they're getting ready for a presentation, like, I mean, I haven't part of the wonder technique, when you're living on your purpose and you want to share with people and get out and present with people, whether you're working as a coach, whether you're working as a professional speaker, it can be helpful for you to remember what you're going to get up and speak about.
Of course.
Right? That's
right.
important. And I created acronyms to help me remember because I'm actually a very shy and quiet person. So to help me remember when I got up in front of people, maybe hundreds, maybe more, I needed to create a memory cue. So I would use images and acronyms to do that. So that's a little secret that people listening can say, okay, so next time I do a presentation at work, whether it's on Zoom or whether it's in person in the future, you can remember things easier if you create something to attach it in your mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My dad used to say stuff like that to me when I was a tiny little girl, and he would help me study for tests and things for school. And he always had this image of our brain being a filing cabinet.
Yes.
And that in each drawer there are folders, and in each folder there are papers. And so if I'm trying to study for a history test, then I have to figure out what file folder to put that knowledge in so that it attaches itself and has a place to be. And then remembering it was just a matter of accessing the right file folder in the right drawer.
Yes.
I've heard other people describe it as like a skeleton, and each idea or each memory or each thing that you're trying to remember has to have a framework onto which to attach itself.
Yes.
So it was appendages or, things like that.
I understand what you're saying, Marci. I hear this because for me, learning French, the French language, I had to build up a certain amount of vocabulary at first. And I started looking at I know the word in English. So what is it in French? Mm-hmm. So we have car in English, voiture in French. Okay, so now when I hear the word voiture, I know it's car. So I was building out like neural connections based upon the words. If somebody could have, and there's some crazy humorous stories that I share with French people because they laugh at them because they know the words, but I misunderstood stuff. When people would just talk in French in front of me, I didn't know what the words meant. So you make your own interpretation of what it is.
Right.
Yes. So I was so wrong in my misunderstanding when I was listening to people. But so what I needed to do is, like you said, the skeleton, I have all this framework in English. And over time, I built up on top of that, the French language, and I attached it. So I was kind of working between two languages, and now I'm comfortable enough that I
where
can
you're thinking in French instead of translating in your
exactly.
head.
But I have my questioning always as to whether am I living in the French language, or is my brain just on super high speed and it's translating so fast that I think I'm in the French language?
Well, either way, it's fine.
It's still working.
It works. Right.
It's working. Exactly.
The second part might be a little bit more fatiguing than the first one, but
the first part is really hard when you don't understand. I used to get like, really, my brain would be like, I got to stop here because I'm just so lost with what people are saying. Yeah. And it's really weird when you watch TV now and I can hear it being translated into English, and in the background I can hear the French, and I'm like, hang on a second here, that's not actually even right. Like you can see the difference between them. Like if you watch a movie that's in French with English subtitles, like that's not what they meant. That's really interesting. Like I'm wondering, so that's a humorous aside. So with learning.
When I was in high school and I studied Spanish as a second language, and I was pretty good at it, but I didn't have a lot of vehicles or time to practice, so it didn't sort of stick into my brain all that much. When I got to college as an English major, I had a very old advisor who changed my schedule for me without my permission And because I had registered for a Spanish class my freshman year at university, and he said, no. As an English literature major, you should be studying French, not Spanish. What the hell? I was 18. I didn't know I could say, well, that's not what I know. So I went into this French class, and the professor was only speaking to us. She wouldn't give us any written materials. She wouldn't write anything down that she was saying. She wouldn't let us take notes because there was nothing to write down. She wanted us to just train our ears and just do it audibly. But I know my brain doesn't work that way. And because of how, at least from my experience, French was not phonetic. You know, you could say qu'est-ce que c'est, and I don't know what the heck that looks like.
Yes.
You know, so I don't know what you're saying. So it sort of shocks my brain, and I can't make sense out of it. Once I see it and then I hear it, then I own it. Then it's mine.
Okay.
And so I had a really hard time, and I was struggling with the English translations, and I couldn't get myself past that point where I was translating in my head. So writing, I was kind of okay because I had time. Speaking, forget. There was no way.
It's really interesting, Marci, would say this, because I was on a podcast with Brittany, and we were talking about language acquisition, and she works with children with language, students, probably not children. And she talked about different ways how we acquire language. And as a young child, we acquire languages very slowly at first, a very small vocabulary. You know, if we're in an English-speaking environment, we'll pass a cup to a child and say cup. Or, you know, they learn the first word mama or papa or daddy.
Right, we start with nouns, right?
Exactly. And they start to get a sense of things, and they build up vocabulary over time. And I remember that when I was in Ireland and I was studying Gaelic, and I literally have 2 sentences probably from Gaelic, because how we studied it was they tried to get us to memorize the verbs, okay? And they gave us poetry to memorize. How can you learn a language that way?
No.
And
it's static, not alive.
It's static, exactly. So if I see something functional, or as people, like when I went to Italy for a little bit, and I was looking in the stores, particularly for the foods, and okay, so that's water, agua. You know, I'm like, okay, I can make sense of these things, you know. And you look at different things, and you start to build a vocabulary. But this is how a child learns. They bit by bit, they assemble things. And as an adult, where I've had this experience.
We make it too complicated initially.
No, exactly. Some of my children have said that, you know, they go to a class on German and the teacher doesn't explain anything, just speaks in German, like you mentioned about French. And like, well, hang on. How are you supposed to be able to frame that in your brain if you have never, ever, and you don't even live in a German-speaking country?
This was an elementary French 1 class. Like, yes. I know nothing. And she was going in there like I had taken 4 years of French.
Exactly. And this becomes a frustration and becomes actually a mental blockage, which is actually normal because you're starting off way too fast. You know what? When people learn how to drive a car, you don't just stick them on the highway, pull into the highway and just say, okay, let's go. You start slowly in a parking lot, or you take classes like this. So why would we do a language? So this is, you know, we're talking about language, but anything that we want to learn, like you go to the gym. You have
to start small.
You got to start small. You work on learning something at the gym. You start ever so slowly. You work on posture, movement, and then you add more weight. But you just don't go into the gym and grab a huge barbell and try and do it. You know,
you'll tear muscles and kill yourself. Yeah,
exactly. And they'd throw you off a boat in the middle of the ocean. Okay, learn to swim. I know some people, you know, there's stories about how people can learn to swim that way. But you think about it, it's if you learn the process, the dynamic, it seems to be a lot easier and if you ramp it up quicker, great. If you feel okay, like for me, like when I get into a topic, I'm really into it, and I will learn rapidly the topic, and I'm so focused on it. But that depends. If it's a topic in school where students are being told you have to learn this, but they have no motivation, this is where when it comes all the way back to permission to heal, what you're all about here is that we need to work on ourselves. As maybe a final point to share, we need to go slow down. we need to say, what one thing can I do per day? And actually, something I would like to share right now is that it's very, very important for us to take silence into our lives again.
Yes,
To
absolutely.
have our phone on airplane, turn it off, go find a space in your own home that you can be alone. Put a do not disturb sign on the door. I'll be available at 8 o'clock. In other words, tell them, I'm going for an hour, but this is when the time is. So people know, oh, okay, yeah, they're not coming out yet. And make that your own space where you can sit and be quiet
Yeah,
and
and
and have
listen
a
to your
chance to be
heart.
with
And
yourself.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can, what, making things simple and not so complicated. And so many people have different versions of meditation. But if you sit down and put your one hand on your heart and one hand on your stomach, and you feel your heart beating and your stomach rising and falling as you breathe.
I'm doing it now.
Yeah.
It automatically forces you to,
To be centered.
yeah.
Yeah. And when I do something like that, I will just feel the air coming in and out of my mouth.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm thinking. That's all my focus is. And right into the actual experience. I don't use any apps. I mean, fine, if you want to, that's great. But I'm thinking if I'm dependent on an app, I'm dependent on something external to
Right.
me. And I always try and bring things, what can I do if I'm on a desert island on my own, if I wanted to be able to be quiet?
Mm-hmm.
So I can sit there and just breathe. So
Sometimes I find like activities that we do by rote, like folding laundry or
yeah,
washing a dish. I find the sensory of folding the towels and how the cloth feels and how many times I'm folding it and the shape I'm folding it into, or the feel of the water and the soap around the glass that I'm washing. I find the sensory of that helpful in getting myself quiet, you know?
brilliant. Yes, like
Yeah.
meditation, washing dishes. Yeah, there's many different things. If you go into the experience,
Yeah.
as I mentioned at the beginning, like when I'm rock climbing, I'm in that experience. And
Absolutely.
people are shouting out, because they have a different opinion. Oh, you should go this way, that way. Many times I'll just say, no, I'm not listening. I'm
Mm-hmm.
here, I'm in this, and I need to keep in tune with myself. I can't be dependent on something outside. So my rock climbing is part of my meditation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, even activities. Like I find painting to be a very meditative thing because it's not text
Yes.
based and I'm just focusing on color and the brush strokes and doing whatever it is I'm doing with the painting, and it allows so much extra space and time for my brain to do its thing,
Yes.
unwind, process, relax, whatever it's doing.
Yes.
I even found like during very difficult periods of my life that even teaching my class was somewhat meditative, in just maybe not meditative but mindful, because I
Yes.
was forced, in order to do my job well, I had to focus on the needs of those 25 kids in my room and the lesson at hand, and it stopped me from perseverating over things that were causing me anxiety or worrying about other stuff, or all those other extraneous things that in this moment not only did I have no control over, but they had no place in what I was doing. So
Yes.
just focusing on that one thing was really a blessing.
Yes. And you can apply that in all different parts of your life.
Yeah.
When you have a meal, you sit down, I will have a meal soon with my children, and they will, you put the phone away. It's out of, I don't care if it rings. I'm in
Yeah,
this experience. Like I'm
exactly.
gonna sit down and be in that experience and listen. And you want to build conversation with somebody else. They're the
Right.
most important one at that time. If you want to tell them they're not important, grab your phone. You know,
Yeah, we had a
it,
no phone rule when the kids were growing up. That's it.
yeah, which
No
is great.
phones.
Yeah.
We
You
said
you
grace.
create a frame
Right.
around it. Yeah,
We
it's
ate
for
our
sure.
food. We talked about our day, and it was a family activity.
Yes.
For that half hour, you can put that away.
Yeah. Which is awesome.
Yeah.
This is the great thing.
Well, this has been fabulous, David. I loved
It
this
has.
conversation. So many useful, tangible, actionable, small, simple, delightful things we can all do today.
Thank you. That's my
Fabulous.
goal. It's like to bring this to everybody. And I can get complicated. I can get deep into science and everything if people want to, if they want to contact me and learn. This is a little bit more complex. but my goal is always to try and make it that there's a simple pathway for people. So if I may share, I mentioned a little bit before about the ebook. On my website, if people go to the wondertechnique.com, there's a little sign up. They get my newsletter, but they also get this 10 steps to health and happiness. They also, I don't know if I sent them to you, Marci. There's a template where they can print off these little mini motivational cards. You can see this one here.
I am peaceful in all I do.
Yeah. And these little cards here, people, they print it off, they can cut them up, they can slip it into their spouse's, wallet, purse, hide in their lunchbox, do it with the children. Nice. I call it positive litter if you leave it on the bus. What a beautiful thing if you find something that's a motivational card. So that's in there. There's also a better sleep checklist that's in that package that's for free. There's a little book of quotations, and there's also a poster of positive quotes that people can print off and stick on their desk at work or at home. And it's all in the present tense, where it's like, I feel happy, I feel creative. You're talking to yourself in positive ways. So there you go.
Reprogramming the machine with positive ideas.
Exactly.
Excellent.
Simpler, easier ways.
Brilliant. I love the simplicity. It's excellent. So if those of you who are listening, if you scroll down into the show notes, I will have placed there for your ease live links to the wondertechnique.com and all manner of being able to get in contact with David Hennessey. And I wish you the freedom to give yourself permission to heal and to move forward through your day with joy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marci.
So much.